Stephen Miller walked into the congressional hearing room thinking he was going to destroy Marilyn Milian on live television. He had his arguments ready, his attacks prepared, and that signature grin that said he knew something you didn't. But what Miller didn't know was that Judge Marilyn Milian had been holding on to explosive information about his personal life for weeks. Information about Elon Musk, his wife Katie, and photos that would end his career in less than 60 seconds. If you want to see how one perfectly timed question can destroy a political career and expose the biggest scandal in Washington, click the like button and subscribe, because this story is going to be truly amazing. The moment happened precisely at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. C-SPAN was broadcasting live to millions of viewers. Miller leaned into his microphone, ready to deliver what he thought would be a career-ending blow to Judge Milian. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye, smiled that knowing smile that would become legendary, and said 6 words that made his face go completely white. "Stephen, how's Katie like lately in Austin?" The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. But in those 4 seconds you could see Stephen Miller's whole world crumble in real time. His mouth opened slightly. His hands gripped the table. Someone in the press gallery whispered, "Oh my God," and Marilyn Milian just sat there as calm as could be, waiting for his reaction. Because she knew what everyone would find out. She knew about the photos. She knew about the secret meetings. She knew about the months-long affair between Elon Musk and Katie Miller, which had been kept hidden from everyone except the people who mattered most. What happened next would become the most viral political moment of the year, destroying Miller's reputation forever and making Marilyn Milian a legend. But first, you have to understand how we got here. To understand why this moment was so devastating, you have to know who these people really are and why they've been at war for years. Stephen Miller isn't just a political consultant. He's the man who has built his entire career on outsmarting everyone in the room. For decades, he's been the mastermind behind some of the most brutal political suppressions in modern history. He doesn't just win arguments. He destroys people completely and permanently. Miller's specialty is finding your weaknesses and exploiting them for the widest possible audience. He's the kind of man who examines your family, your finances, your personal life, looking for anything he can use to humiliate you when it matters most. And he's very, very good at it. His wife, Katie, has been his perfect political partner for 8 years. She's smart, well-connected, and knows how to play Washington's game. Together, they are an unstoppable force. On the other hand, you have Judge Marilyn Milian. If Miller is a chess master, Judge Milian is a master detective. She's the former defense attorney who never lost a case, because she never went to court without knowing all the important facts. She doesn't make accusations she can't prove. She doesn't throw punches she can't hit. And she never bluffs. For 3 years, Miller and Judge Milian circled each other like predators. It began during a heated immigration debate in Phoenix, where Judge Milian denounced Miller's policies on live television as cruel. Miller didn't appreciate being embarrassed by someone he considered inferior. Since then, he has made it his personal mission to destroy her career. He shows up at her speaking engagements. He sends late-night emails to her office, asking for information she's already provided. He was even spotted in the audience during her committee hearings, just watching, waiting for his moment. Miller thought that moment had finally arrived. The Judiciary Committee had called a special hearing on asylum procedures, and Miller was supposed to question Judge Milian about her voting record. He had prepared for weeks, poring over every interview she had ever given, searching for inconsistencies he could exploit. What he didn't know was that Judge Milian had been preparing too, not for his questions about policy, but for the moment when she would finally reveal what she'd learned about his marriage. Because 3 weeks earlier, Judge Milian had received a text message that changed everything. It was from her college friend Ayanna, now working as a venture capitalist in Austin. The message was simple. "Girl, "You won't believe who I just saw Elon with." The photos that followed would reveal the biggest political scandal of the year. But they would also give Marilyn Milian the one thing she needed to end Stephen Miller's career for good: the truth. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was about hypocrisy. This was about a man who had built his career by destroying the lives of others while hiding his own secrets. And Judge Marilyn Milian was about to make sure the whole world knew. The story actually begins 3 weeks before that hearing, at an exclusive SpaceX donation event in Austin, Texas. The kind of party where you have to donate at least $5 million to get in. Elon Musk held court on the roof of the Loron Hotel and discussed the future of space travel with some of America's wealthiest people. The guest list was strictly private. No press, no cameras, no social media posts allowed. That's why no one expected to see Katie Miller there, alone. Katie had flown in from Washington that morning and told Stephen she was visiting her sister in Dallas. But instead of going to Dallas, she drove straight to Austin and walked into that party wearing a stunning black dress that definitely wasn't picked out for a family visit. Ayanna Blackwell spotted her almost immediately. As a venture capitalist, Ayanna knew all the major political players, and Katie Miller definitely stood out in a crowd of tech billionaires. But what really caught Ayanna's attention was how Katie and Elon were acting around each other. This wasn't casual conversation between strangers. They were laughing at inside jokes, touching each other's arms while they talked, standing just a little too close for two people who'd supposedly just met. Ayanna pulled out her phone and took 2 quick photos from across the rooftop. In the first one, you can see Elon leaning in close to Katie's ear, whispering something that made her throw her head back, laughing. In the second, Katie's hand is resting on Elon's chest, while he looks down at her with an expression that definitely isn't appropriate for a married woman. The next morning, Ayanna sent those photos to Marilyn Milian with a message. "This was supposed to be secret, but I thought you should know." Judge Milian stared at those photos for a long time. She recognized Katie Miller immediately. They'd been introduced at several Washington events over the years, but seeing her in Austin acting intimate with Elon Musk while her husband was back in D.C. was something entirely different. Most politicians would have immediately leaked those photos to the press or used them to attack Miller publicly. But Judge Marilyn Milian is smarter than that. She understood that information is only powerful if you use it at exactly the right moment. So instead of going public, she made some phone calls. Quiet calls to people she trusted. A reporter at The Hill who owed her a favor. A blogger who covered Washington gossip. A few staffers who worked in different offices, but always knew what was happening behind the scenes. She didn't share the photos. She just asked innocent questions. "Have you heard anything about Katie Miller lately? Anyone know why she was in Texas last week? Seen any interesting couples around town?" Within 48 hours, whispers were spreading through Washington like wildfire. People started paying attention to Katie's social media posts. They noticed she hadn't been seen at any public events with Stephen recently. Someone spotted her getting coffee alone near Capitol Hill when she was supposed to be out of town. The rumor mill was churning. But nobody had proof. Nobody, except Judge Marilyn Milian. Meanwhile, Stephen Miller was completely oblivious. He was too busy preparing for what he thought would be his moment of triumph, the congressional hearing, where he would finally destroy Judge Milian's career. He spent hours reviewing her record, looking for inconsistencies. He practiced his questions in front of a mirror, perfecting his tone of voice to sound both authoritative and condescending. He even consulted a media coach to ensure he looked good on camera. Miller was so focused on his planned attack that he didn't notice the subtle changes around him. He didn't see how other political insiders stopped making eye contact at events. He didn't catch the whispered conversations that stopped whenever he entered a room. He certainly didn't notice that his wife had been distant and distracted for weeks. On the morning of the hearing, Miller woke up with more confidence than he had in months. He put on his best suit, rehearsed his opening statement once more, and headed to Capitol Hill, ready for war. Katie wasn't there to wish him luck. According to her text message, she was dealing with a family emergency in Austin. Miller didn't think twice. As he walked into the hearing room, Miller truly believed he was about to have the best day of his political career. He had no idea that Judge Marilyn Milian was sitting at her table with information that would end his marriage, destroy his reputation, and make him a laughingstock across the country. The committee room was packed with reporters, cameras, and political insiders who sensed something big was about to happen. The tension was high, but Miller interpreted it as a preview of his performance. He took his seat, confidently shuffled his papers, and looked across the table at Judge Marilyn Milian with a grin that indicated he knew exactly how this would end. He was right. He just had no idea who would be left when it was over. The hearing began exactly as Stephen Miller had planned. The committee chair called order, introduced the topic, delays in the asylum process, and gave Miller permission to begin his questioning. Miller leaned into his microphone with that characteristic confidence and began his attack.
Judge Milian, your voting record shows a consistent pattern of prioritizing political theater over practical solutions. Could you explain to the American people why you continue to support policies that have directly led to more border chaos? It was a typical Miller opening. Aggressive, full of assumptions, designed to immediately put his opponent on the defensive. In the past, this strategy worked perfectly. Politicians would get upset, start explaining themselves, and fall right into his traps. But Judge Marilyn Milian didn't fall for the trap. She looked directly at Miller, tilted her head slightly, and said, "Stephen, I'd love to talk policy with someone who actually focuses on policy rather than personal drama. But are you sure you want to have that conversation today?" Miller's eyes narrowed. That wasn't the answer he had prepared for. "I'm not sure what you mean, Judge, but I think the American people deserve answers about your failed immigration agenda." "Oh, I'm not insinuating anything at all," Judge Milian replied, her voice sharpening slightly. "I'm asking you directly if you're mentally present enough for a serious policy discussion, or if you're distracted by other things happening in your life right now." You felt the room shift. The reporters in the back were paying closer attention. Committee members looked up from their phones. Even the CSPAN cameras seemed to sharpen. Miller forced a smile. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm here to discuss your record on immigration enforcement. Unless you're planning to distract from your failures by making this personal." Then Judge Marilyn Milian smiled. Not a wide smile, just a small, knowing line at the corner of her mouth that somehow filled the entire room with tension. "Stephen," she said, her voice calm and controlled, "how is Katie Austin doing lately?" The silence that followed was deafening. Miller's face went from confident to confused to completely pale in about 3 seconds. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Someone in the press room whispered, "Oh, shh," loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "I'm sorry." "What?" Miller finally managed to say. "Austin, Texas," Judge Milian continued, her voice maintaining its tone. "Your wife has been spending a lot of time there lately. I was just wondering how she's feeling. The weather, the company, the private events. You know." Miller's hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly, his knuckles were white. "I don't know what you're talking about,"
Really? Judge Marilyn Milian raised an eyebrow. Because I have some friends in Austin who tried to compose himself. This is completely inappropriate. We're here to discuss policy, not to spread gossip and innuendo. Oh, this isn't gossip, Judge Milian said, pulling out her phone. This is documentation. Do you want me to show everyone the photos, or would you rather answer some questions about border security? Then Stephen Miller completely lost his balance. You can't do this, he shouted in a cracking voice. This is a congressional hearing, not a tabloid. You can't just make accusations without evidence. I don't make accusations, Judge Milian replied calmly. I'm asking about your wife's travel schedule. But if you'd rather talk about evidence... She held up her phone, and although no one could see the screen, it was clear that everyone in the room knew exactly what she was threatening to reveal. Miller stood up so quickly that he knocked over his glass of water. This is intimidation. This is a coordinated attack. I demand that the chairman put an end to this character assassination. But the committee chairman, who had watched this with barely concealed astonishment, merely shrugged. Mr. Miller, Judge Milian asked you a simple question about your family. If you don't want to answer, you can go back to your prepared questions about immigration policy. Miller looked around the room desperately. Every camera was trained on him. Every reporter was taking notes. Even his own staff stared at him with expressions of sheer horror.
You can't... Miller stuttered completely, unable to form a coherent sentence. Stephen, Judge Marilyn Milian said, her voice now filled with something almost like sympathy. Maybe we should take a break. Give you a moment to call your wife. Just ask how she's doing in Austin. Make sure she's safe. Miller's face went from pale to bright red. How dare you? My marriage is none of your business. You're absolutely right, Judge Milian nodded. Your marriage is none of my business. But when someone builds their entire career on attacking other people's private lives, their family values, their private choices, and then their own family starts making very public choices, that's everyone's business, isn't it? The room fell completely silent. Miller stood there, shaking with rage, unable to respond because everyone knew she was absolutely right. I think, Judge Marilyn Milian said quietly, we should probably end this hearing so you can take care of your personal affairs. Unless you want to continue discussing asylum policy while your wife deals with her own situation in Austin. Miller grabbed his papers, stuffed them in his briefcase, and stormed out of the room without another word. The committee chair called for a recess, but no one was paying attention to the proceedings. The damage was done. In less than 10 minutes, Judge Marilyn Milian had utterly destroyed Stephen Miller's reputation, exposed his biggest secret, and made him a national laughingstock. All this without ever raising her voice, never losing her composure, and never saying anything that wasn't absolutely true. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic. Within 30 minutes of Miller leaving the hearing room, #MillerMeltdown was trending on Twitter. Within an hour, the video clip had been viewed more than 2 million times. By the end of the day, it was the most watched political moment of the year. But the real story had only just begun. At 4:15 p.m., barely 2 hours after the hearing ended, TMZ published an exclusive story headlined, Political Power Couple in Crisis. Stephen Miller's wife spotted cozying up to Elon Musk in Austin. The story included the photos Ayanna had taken, plus several more from different angles that made Katie and Elon look very much like a couple. By 6 p.m., every major news network had covered the story. CNN aired a segment titled, Marriage,
politics, and public meltdowns. Fox News tried to portray it as an attack on conservative family values, but even their anchors couldn't hide their shock at Miller's complete breakdown live on television. MSNBC brought in body language experts to analyze Miller's reaction. You can see the exact moment when he
made parody videos using Miller's "How dare you" outburst as comedic gold. Instagram memes compared his meltdown to famous political scandals throughout history. Reddit users analyzed every frame of the hearing footage, pointing out all the moments when Miller's composure completely broke down. But the most damning reporting came from political insiders who had worked with Miller for years. One former colleague told Politico, "Stephen's entire brand was built on being the smartest and most prepared person in every room. Seeing Judge Milian so completely outshine him destroys everything he built his reputation on." Another Washington insider was even more blunt. "Miller made a career of destroying people with their personal secrets. Now everyone knows his biggest secret, and he handled it like an amateur. He's done." The conservative movement that had supported Miller for years immediately began to distance itself. The Heritage Foundation quietly removed his biography from its website. The American Enterprise Institute canceled his upcoming speaking engagement. Even Tucker Carlson, who had been one of Miller's biggest supporters, refused to have him on his show. Meanwhile, Katie Miller's silence was deafening. She didn't return reporters' calls. She posted nothing on social media. She didn't issue statements through representatives. She simply disappeared. But Elon Musk? He posted a single tweet that night at 11:47 p.m. "Life is complicated. The truth is simple." The tweet received 3.2 million likes and 800,000 retweets. By the next morning, the story was more than just a political scandal. It was a cultural moment about hypocrisy, power, and accountability. Women across the country shared clips of Judge Marilyn Milian's performance with captions like, "This is how you deal with a bully," and "Look how she mercilessly destroyed him without even raising her voice." Young political staffers analyzed her strategy, trying to understand how she had managed to control the narrative so perfectly. But perhaps the most important reaction came from other politicians who had been attacked by Miller over the years. Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeted, "Sometimes karma has perfect timing." Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez posted, "Fascinating to see someone finally held accountable for their own tactics." 3 days after the hearing, the Washington Post published a comprehensive investigation of Miller's career, documenting all the times he had used personal attacks and family scandals to destroy his political opponents. The headline read, "The Miller Method: How a Political Hitman Finally Met His Match." The article featured interviews with dozens of politicians, staffers, and journalists who had been targeted by Miller's tactics over the years. One recurring theme emerged: Miller's complete inability to cope with having his own methods used against him. A former congressman told the Post, "The moment someone turned their own playbook against him, he completely collapsed. He could dish it out, but he absolutely could not take it." A week later, Miller's consulting firm lost its 3 largest clients. His book contract was canceled. His regular appearances on cable news programs were suspended indefinitely. The think tank where he held a senior fellowship announced that they were restructuring their staff. In reality, they were firing him, but they tried to be polite about it. Katie Miller, meanwhile, was spotted dining with Elon Musk at an exclusive Los Angeles restaurant. When photographers tried to approach their table, Musk's security team made it clear that questions were not welcome. But the photos spoke for themselves. Katie looked happier and more relaxed than she had in years at a public appearance. 2 weeks after the hearing, the divorce papers were filed in Washington, D.C. federal court.
Katie Miller filed for the dissolution of her 8-year marriage to Stephen Miller, citing irreconcilable differences. She also demanded half of their substantial assets and ownership of their Georgetown home. Miller's response was filed 3 days later. In addition to contesting the financial demands, his legal team made an unusual request. They asked the court to halt all proceedings and prevent either party from publicly discussing the case. It was a definitive acknowledgement of how completely Judge Marilyn Milian had destroyed him. The man who had built his career on exposing other people's private affairs was now desperately trying to keep
his own private affairs out of the news. But it was too late. The damage was permanent and total. But the story became even more interesting when you look at what happened behind closed doors in the weeks following Miller's breakdown. 3 days after the hearing, Judge Marilyn Milian received an unexpected visit at her Capitol Hill office. At 7:30 p.m., long after most of her staff had gone home, she received a message from her secretary that gave her pause. "Madam, Elon Musk is here to see you. No appointment, no security. He says it's personal." Elon walked into her office in jeans and a simple black t-shirt. Not exactly the typical uniform for Capitol Hill meetings. He looked exhausted, like someone who hadn't slept well in days. "Judge Milian," he said, extending his hand. "I think we need to talk." "Mr. Musk," she replied without getting up from her desk. "I assume this is about Katie." Elon nodded and sat down across from her without being asked. "I want you to know that what happened between Katie and me wasn't planned. It wasn't to embarrass Stephen Miller or create a political scandal." Judge Milian studied his face carefully. After years of reading people in courtrooms and during hearings, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to detect lies. Elon, she realized, was telling the truth. "I believe you," she said, "but that doesn't change what happened in that hearing room." "No, it really doesn't," Elon agreed. "And honestly, after seeing that footage, I'm not sure I feel bad about it. Stephen Miller has been ruining people's lives with their personal information for years. Maybe it's time someone gave him a taste of his own medicine." Elon went on to reveal how Miller had tried to destroy one of his renewable energy bills 3 years earlier by leaking manipulated text messages. The bill could have created thousands of jobs, but Miller killed it to score political points. "Stephen turned politics into a bloody sport," Elon said. "What you did in that hearing wasn't cruel. It was justice." For Judge Marilyn Milian, the conversation confirmed what she already knew. Miller's downfall wasn't just about one scandal or one affair. It was about years of accumulated karma finally catching up with him. A month later, Judge Milian was invited to speak at Harvard Law School about political strategy and communication. During the Q&A session, a student asked her about that famous moment when she destroyed Miller's career. "I didn't destroy Stephen Miller," she said calmly. "Stephen Miller destroyed Stephen Miller. I just made sure people could see it happen." The audience erupted in applause, but she wasn't finished. "The most powerful weapon in politics isn't what you say. It's knowing when to say it." For years, Miller had been using people's secrets against them. He just never considered that other people might also have secrets about him. The students sat in silence, hanging on her every word. True power comes from preparation, patience, and the realization that the truth always wins in the end. Stephen Miller forgot that lesson, and it cost him everything. Later that evening, during a private dinner with Harvard faculty, a professor asked Judge Marilyn Milian what she planned to do next. "The same thing I've always done," she replied. "My job, fighting for my constituents, working on legislation that actually helps people, and making sure bullies like Stephen Miller understand that their tactics have consequences." "But you've become a national figure now," the professor insisted. "There are already rumors of presidential campaigns, Senate elections, even cabinet positions in future administrations." Judge Milian smiled.
Power isn't about titles or positions. It's about using every platform you have to bring about positive change. Whether that's from a congressional office, a Senate seat, or anywhere else, I don't care. What matters is that Stephen Miller's era of political terrorism is over. And everyone who comes after him knows that their actions have consequences. 6 months later, Stephen Miller was working as a mid-level consultant for a small lobbying firm in Virginia, earning a fraction of his previous salary and struggling to build a reputation that might never recover. Katie Miller and Elon Musk made their relationship official with a joint appearance at a charity gala in Miami. They seemed genuinely happy together, and sources close to both confirmed that they were discussing long-term plans. And Judge Marilyn Milian? She was nominated for Time magazine's Person of the Year for redefining political discourse and demonstrating that intelligence and preparation can overcome aggression and intimidation. She didn't win the award, but she didn't need to. She had already won something far more valuable: respect from anyone who had ever been bullied, intimidated, or attacked by people like Stephen Miller. Because sometimes the most important victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's showing everyone that your enemy can be defeated. If this story has shown you why strategic thinking trumps aggressive tactics every time, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible political analysis. And let me know in the comments what your favorite moment was from Judge Marilyn Milian's masterclass in political warfare. Was it the first question that made Miller's face go white? The moment he completely lost control? Or the way she never had to raise her voice to completely destroy him? Leave your thoughts below, and I'll see you in the next video, where we'll analyze even more shocking political moments that changed everything. The lesson here isn't just about one hearing or one scandal. It's about what happens when preparation meets opportunity, when patience defeats aggression, and when someone who has spent their career attacking others intimidated. In a world where political discourse seems to become grimmer and more personal every day, Judge Marilyn Milian reminded everyone that sometimes the most devastating response to aggression is simply telling the truth at precisely the right moment. And that truth can be more powerful than any insult, more effective than any attack, and more lasting than any scandal. Stephen Miller learned that lesson the hard way. The question is, who will learn it next?